Americans are scoring in Europe. The USLPA's response to last week's league announcement, and what the heck is going on in Vancouver. That and more on this morning's version of Morning Kicker. Hello. How are you doing? Welcome to the show. You found your way to Morning Kicker, on the show where we dot the map of the American soccer landscape, the ever-changing American soccer landscape. Good morning. How are you? My name's Robert Kerr, local soccer guy, and to my side, Jason Davis, radio soccer guy. How you feeling?
I'm good, Robert. I'm ready for spring, but other than that, it's a-okay over here in Northern Virginia. And look, ready to dive back in. I know we've got all of our best and brightest here this morning with us. Shout out to Armando saying good morning to everybody. If you want to get your good mornings in, go ahead and drop them in. I'm seeing a comment about how close we are to Major League Soccer starting. We're going to talk about the soccer that happens before MLS gets underway on this show, so I'm excited for that. Shout out to Homeless Shoe as well.
Yeah, he's talking my language. Hi, diddly ho, their neighbors. That wasn't going to go unnoticed.
Playing the clanger, everybody. It's a Socceroo diddly doo day.
Yeah, indeedly do. It is. Shout out to all of our members. Let's move right by that. Let's shout out to all of our new members. We had some generosity in the chat. A number of memberships were gifted out there. So welcome to our new members. And thank you so much for those gifts on Friday. Lots of new members in the group. So thank you so much. And is that Mr. B again, or is that from Friday?
No, I accidentally put up Mr. B's post from Friday. That's okay. I was looking at what we had happen on Friday. It's a new week, but obviously we should still always be shouting out Mr. Bob Newchow, who has been so generous with us and has been supporting the show. And again, is a poet. Like, not that he didn't know it. He actually does know it. He's a poet. He's got a book of poetry that he handed me in Albuquerque, which I still take a look at on a regular basis. Chris gave out some memberships on Friday. Luke gave out some memberships on Friday. I know we've got a bunch of people in the Discord. Rob, the Discord's got new blood. It's always good.
Yeah, the Discord server for MK Ultras, the channel members, has been popping off. And the members, the Ultras making clubs, has really been a nice thread, nice addition to the Discord server. A lot of folks out there planning their first ever seasons for their team, and other folks planning for something maybe down the line. So that's an intriguing thread nonetheless. On top of that, if you're not digging in that deep, you can talk about England, you can talk about Major League Soccer, you can talk about USL and your local team. Great threads there in the Morning Kicker on Discord server.
There is nothing too esoteric. There's nothing too off the normal radar of a soccer fan that doesn't get talked about in the Discord for Morning Kicker. Like, there are people diving so deep into the very bottom, the very organic, bottom-up nature of soccer, not just here, but around the world, that it is a special place.
And the pressure's on, Jason, for us to get this Morning Kick Around merchandise up and running. We've been throwing around designs. We get some ideation, but people are banging on our doors for Clang the Clanger merchandise and the Map swag. So we really got to get on that.
You know what we should do? And I know, again, a lot of you are already in the Discord. A lot of you will have seen it. But if you have not, maybe we can share some of the badges that have been created in the Discord, Rob, for Morning Kick Around. Obviously we have, what is it? Franz Peckenpower? Is that what is his name? David Peckham? I can't remember his name. Well, we have a rooster. He's made it onto a badge or two that people have designed. Maybe we'll share those.
Yeah, welcome aboard. New members that gobbled up those memberships: Chris James, Regino Gonzalez, Front Row View, Sonny, Thomas Willenbring, Tricky Turnip, Bernardo Bunting, King Coheed, Jojo, Ant 28226, Roger Jachim, and many more. Welcome aboard. Great to have you with us here on Morning Kick Around. In addition to that merch, we do have another big announcement. We have the Morning Kick Around Kickathon coming up in a couple weeks.
We do. That's going to be a marathon show, certainly by our standards. February 18th, as you can see on the screen. So mark it on your calendars. Block off your day. If you need to call out of work, Call out of work, okay? Because this is the most important thing that's going to happen on February 18th in the world. In the world. Hopefully, we're going to line up a bunch of very cool guests. We want it to be sort of a hangout, casual thing, have some people pop in, dive into some topics a little deeper than maybe we normally do because we'll have some time to stretch our legs. We'll take a bunch of questions. We'll catch you up on what we know about various projects happening around American soccer, whether that be clubs launching or stadiums under construction. There will be some World Cup talk, right? We are now in the final stages of the runway towards the World Cup. It's coming, and I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, if anyone sees any positive World Cup related stories, we'd love to hear them. I mean, all the news seems to be charging for this, charging for that. There was even a story about a $300 parking, which I didn't feel like engaging on a cold, blustery February Monday. But nonetheless, before we get going, let you guys know we are a podcast as well. So if you prefer to listen and watch us on your preferred podcast platform, we are available there. Support us on social media at MKickaround across all the social media platforms. Or if you want to write us a note, you have an expanded comment, question, concern, or business interest, morningkickaround@thegmail.com. You ready for the show?
Let's do it.
All right, let's kick some long balls here on Monday's edition of Morning Kick Around. Good morning. Kicking off our Monday with a donation, Mr. Bob. Late but in earnest there. Thank you so much, as always, Mr. Bob, out in New Mexico for supporting the program. So we're going to kick it all off. American players have been very active. American players are now in the global rumor mill and also performing on the field. So I'm going to give you an option, Jason. Americans are performing well. Where would you like to start? Ricardo Pepi's sale to your Fulham is off. Sargent's trade, I don't know what you'd call it, saga is pending. Weston McKennie in great form in Europe and in Italy. Tillman scoring goals. Freeman going from Orlando to Spain. Where would you like to start?
Okay, I think the Ricardo Pepi is its own whole segment saga story. That would be a blocked out thing for me because that's a much bigger deal because of how close it came and maybe where we are today with updates out of Holland. Look, Weston McKennie's in good form. He scored again for Juve and a win over Parma, looking incredible. We are talking about what his future might be. It is still a little up in the air. It certainly feels like it would be ridiculous for Juve not to re-sign him. I guess it is just a matter of what the number is. Armando is saying McKennie rumored to be headed for renewal with Juve, sizable increase in salary as well. Yeah, that's what makes the most sense to me. Right now, Juve is just like everybody else in world football. They're trying to manage their budget. And while they're a massive club and they are the most successful team in the history of Italian football, they are just like a lot of Italian clubs where they don't have the same kind of cash to throw around as, say, a Premier League team does based on broadcast revenue and things like that. Now, they moved into their own stadium, which is something most Italian teams haven't managed yet. So they have that advantage. But they have also been under the shadow of the Cristiano Ronaldo transfer number, the money that they spent on that when he joined from Real Madrid, however many years ago that was. That's still a thing on the books at Juve. And I'm not saying that's the reason to shortchange Weston McKennie, but it is part of the conversation around everything that goes down here. Look, it's easy for me as an American soccer fan to be upset on behalf of McKennie. How dare they disrespect Weston McKennie? Look at how important he's been. No matter who's the manager of Juve, he finds a way to make himself important to that team, and he's always in the team. He's always doing, that's easy for me to do. I don't know exactly what's going on with Weston McKennie on his end, but I hope we are headed towards that because, again, scoring goals, filling a bunch of roles, he's the flexible, adaptable player that makes what Juve is doing right now work, Rob.
Well, he's certainly doing big things for Juve. My question to home in on this, I've seen a little bit of debate online when the goal over the weekend. Is Weston McKennie in the best form of his career or is he in the best shape of his career?
Why are those things mutually exclusive? No, they could be the same things. I mean, I don't know. I'm not checking his body fat. Rob, are you checking his body fat? Do you have some inside information I don't have? I don't think his physical fitness is necessarily the thing that's making him play this well. I think he's being utilized properly, or he's being given an opportunity to thrive with the way he plays by a manager in Luciano Spalletti who has unleashed him that way. That's how I would view that. He's not sort of playing in a amorphous box to box midfield role and just sort of asked to run between the lines. He's sort of being given the opportunity to push up high when the attack demands it and be an extra body in the box, which is what you saw with the goal against Parma. He's also a guy who has been tasked with being part of the defensive setup. I mean, he's a wing back. He's not doing a ton of defending, but you can see when they are playing against the ball that Wes McKennie has responsibilities in a different part of the field than where he ends up when they have the ball, right? That kind of, it's not exactly total football, right? Because they're not just interchanging all the time, but Wes McKennie specifically is asked to do a bunch of different things, and it plays into his strengths.
And okay, with that said, I think those things, definitely couldn't go hand in hand. And he's definitely getting a lot of opportunity to stretch his legs. Started 18 of 22 matches, 3 goals, 2 assists. And if you guys haven't seen the goal he scored over the weekend, it is quite the peach. Ricardo Pepi, like you said, a lot to unpack there. Fulham really throwing a number of bids for the American, even though he's injured. His injury or his transfer saga a bigger impact on what happens to him as far as selection for the World Cup?
Oh, let's talk about the transfer saga first. Let's talk about what's going on now before we talk about what's coming up in the World Cup. I mean, that's not here yet, right? We don't know. Ricardo Pepi is a very talented player, and I still believe in him, and I still think he's going to find himself one day scoring a number of goals in a top European league. I don't know that's going to be the Premier League. I think that, obviously I'm wearing my bias on my sleeve when I say that I would love for him to go to Fulham, not only because an American in the Premier League is fun, but because I'm a Fulham fan, and that would give me another American to root for at Fulham. I don't know that he would be a massive hit right away at Fulham, right? It's a tough league to adapt to, right? Raul Jimenez is a very good forward. He's almost 35 years old, so you're looking for a way to replace him, and Rodrigo Muniz has not been the answer. But there's definitely an argument, and you can find this. I think Matt Doyle was posting about it today on Blue Sky. You can find an argument that this is a massive, massive overpayment by Fulham if they actually pulled this off, if they actually paid this money. And again, right now the deal is off because PSV Eindhoven doesn't want to do the deal, but I'll come back to that in a second. So Doyle's argument is that Ricardo Pepi has not really scored against the bigger teams in Holland, right? He has some Champions League goals, but they're not against big clubs generally, that he's a bit of a flat track bully. So does his game translate to the Premier League, which is, if not the most competitive league in the world, certainly the most physical? There are things about the Premier League that will test his abilities to score goals. Now, again, I think it's kind of hard to know for sure, but I can understand the argument that he's not quite there yet in terms of what he's already accomplished to sort of guarantee Premier League success. And again, the number, which I think is at 37 million pounds, right? So it seems like, wow, that's a big number for a 21-year-old American who, again, hasn't scored a bunch of goals in a top league or against top competition. Why is Fulham paying that? That's one question. The other side of this, with the deal now off, is why in the hell is PSV Eindhoven saying no? Now, the story is that they want a replacement in before they're willing to sell Ricardo Pepi, and they can't find a replacement in this window before the window closes in January. Now, that's interesting because last time I checked, PSV Eindhoven has a 17-point lead in the Eredivisie table. So why on earth is it so important to replace Ricardo Pepi now when you're basically cruising to a league title? And you could probably, again, for a guy who wasn't their starter, if we were talking about Ricardo Pepi was the PSV Eindhoven starter week in and week out, and they were relying on him for tons of minutes, then okay, yeah, maybe you need to get your replacement in before you sell him to Fulham. But at that money, that amount for a guy again with a limited resume, as good as I think he is, it's a lot of faith on my part, not necessarily evidence. So yeah, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, it sounds like you want Pepe at Fulham with your heart, but not necessarily your head here. There's no guarantee. It's a gamble, like you said. That's a big price tag. We don't necessarily know if he has that speed or physicality or the guy. We've seen strikers with bigger pedigree not
Yeah,
succeed
sure.
in the Premier League.
I think if you're trying to be as objective as possible, the profile that Ricardo Pepi has does not guarantee Premier League success. Now, I think he has an uncanny nose for goal. I think he
Yeah,
just knows
no
how to
doubt.
score goals. And I think that's really hard to quantify. I mean, you could quantify it in goals, but for a young player, okay. Now, again, Bernardo is saying in the chat that Ricardo Pepi is a starter. He's a starter in name, but he has not played enough 90-minute matches for you to go, oh, yeah, that's a guy that they just think of as the number one at PSV Eindhoven. What I'm saying is it's still about what he has done, not about what he could do if he was available. And obviously, that's the other point about this. He's not playing until March because of this arm injury. So Fulham's going to pay $37 million in the January transfer window where you pay a premium anyway for a guy who's not available until March? That's weird. And then again, PSV Eindhoven is saying, no, we can't sell him now because we need a replacement for a guy who's not going to play until March. And you have a 17-point lead. None of this kind of lines up for logical reasons. I don't quite get that part of it. Now, I'm not saying there's anything untoward happening here or whatever, but it's interesting to me that you have an American running PSV Eindhoven, all right, but Dutch American, but a former American international in Ernie Stewart, and you have American ownership at Fulham. I don't know. That's just a thing that's interesting to me as they talk about a transfer of an American player.
Usually when these numbers don't line up and don't necessarily make sense, there's usually another outside element that we come to learn later on. And teams are smart. They don't willingly overpay for players that they don't think are at the level. I mean, why would you do that? Not for outside influence.
The other thing about this is, and again, so Riverside Grow, I just put the comment up on screen. PSV will never get an offer that large again unless Pepi lights up the World Cup, which is unlikely because he's behind Fowler and Balogun. Now, that's our perception. All signs point to Balogun being the number one choice for Mauricio Pochettino. So I would agree with that. It's possible that Ricardo Pepi has a very good World Cup and lights it up, and PSV Eindhoven will get an even bigger offer after the World Cup. But that's dicey, right? There's no guarantee of that. But, and again, I talk about the American ownership and American running PSV. Maybe the thought is at Fulham, a club with a history of American players coming through, that, you know, as a la Clint Dempsey or whatever, with a World Cup in America, you're going to sell a lot of Ricardo Pepi shirts if you get him in now and print the shirts, right? Is that part of the calculation? Like, is marketing part of the calculation, right? Because I mean, it is for everybody. Let's not pretend it's not. Every signing has some level of marketing thought behind it. It doesn't mean that you don't sign a player who's not marketable if they can help you win. It just means that if you can sign a player who not only can help you win, but is also marketable, bonus, awesome. You cut into the transfer fee by making it up via the marketability of the player. And Ricardo Pepi has marketability with a World Cup in America. I'm not saying it's gigantic. I don't know if it justifies a 37 million pound price tag, but it's something.
Yeah, for now, Ricardo Pepi staying put, though, in Holland at PSV, rejecting that offer. Strange, though, may it be, with such a giant lead and him not being a starter, having only started 8 games so far this season in Holland. Just quick note before we move on, Josh Sargent still in the midst of his saga, but the window's still open for landing in MLS until March. So keeping eyes on that. So we're going to move along, come right back with another hot topic or another long ball here in just a sec. Last week, the USL announced long-awaited details about the name of the First Division league that they are starting in 2028, USL Premier, and as well as the league structure. And go check out the videos on the channel right now discussing what was announced in that last week. But the USL Players Association, let's not forget the USL and their players at a labor impasse as we speak. The CBA, the first ever CBA for the USL Players Union, expires at the end of December. So operating without one for the last month. And then so you see it on screen here, USL League HQ announcing a Division I league but they don't have a deal with their players. The players also stressing that they don't have that 5 to 7 year runway that the league is claiming that they have.
Yeah, it says here, so you can see the big graphic. USL League HQ announced the new Division 1 league structure today, quote unquote USL Premier League, reported by The Athletic. It was reported by everybody, but okay, I guess you referenced The Athletic because they're a big name. USLPA says in the description here, or the whatever, I mean, I guess that's the caption. USL announced the new Premier League today. In the same breath, they said it creates, quote, strong foundation for players, unquote, while, quote, unlocking opportunities for investors, unquote. Players are still bargaining for healthcare and livable wages. Define foundation, which is, not a direct shot, but is a pretty pointed thing about how, if you're saying this is a foundation, define that, because for the players, it does not feel like there is a foundation coming when there's no deal. They went on here, take soccer out of it. A company just announced a major expansion while its workers are bargaining for health care. That's a red flag. This is obviously a little bit more pointed. And yeah, I mean, that we talked about the healthcare thing. They're very much leading into healthcare over at the USLPA as their cause du jour, or as their cause for people to rally around. Certainly soccer fans can identify in a country where healthcare is always a topic. Fans who might support their USL teams can understand what it's like not to have healthcare or have to pay a lot for it. The premiums go up, and here players are saying we don't even have it, right? Most of us don't even have. Some of us do, some of us don't, and we just want to normalize this. Players don't have a 5 to 7 year runway, which is something Paul McDonough said in that Athletic story. They have bodies, careers, and bills right now. Major league branding, sub-professional conditions. So, again, the USOPA clearly not in a position to say, hey, this is great, let's move forward together, because they haven't made enough progress. And, we talked about this. As long as there is bargaining ongoing, as long as there is a good faith attempt to figure this out, the league will continue to operate. USL will continue to operate. Players will continue to be signed. The season will continue to approach with a plan to launch it. It will require either the players striking or the owners the league locking them out for there to be obviously a work stoppage and therefore no start to the league season. And we talked about the problems that face the USLPA in that regard, Rob, because do they have a strike fund that will allow them to actually do that without jeopardizing the livelihood, the ability to pay rent, all the other things that come with life for their players? And I don't know. I mean, I want there to be more leverage on the players' side. But at this point, as this thing gets more drawn out, and we're more than a month since the actual expiration of the deal of the previous CBA, I don't know where this lands.
So in messaging with the USLPA a little bit, they said the next negotiation session is on Wednesday, but there hasn't been any significant progress in the last meetings leading up till now. But there was in one of the articles we read, I believe that there was maybe the only kind of concession was agreeing to extending a 10-month contracts into 12. But that was the only sort of leeway or any sort of give that we've even heard an inclination. Everything else has been no progress, like flatly. And so I'm curious, like once you get to a certain amount of meetings and you guys are not progressing, I wonder how those meetings look. To be a fly on the wall, I wonder if any members of the press are being allowed into these sessions and just see what sort of like temperature is in these rooms. I mean, before the CBA even expired in 2025, they said they'd had, tons, many meetings in 2025, and they've had a handful in the last couple of weeks. Last week, the USL drops their big plans. What does that do to negotiations? Does that ramp up the pressure on either party having these things laid out there? Obviously having that comeback of like, you're making these grand plans. And I thought that was interesting that they tied draw the comparison to a regular company without soccer. Like if they were expanding their operations and then the players or the regular employees didn't have a contract or a setup, obviously that would be red flags. I'm curious if now that if the league has that kind of roadmap or that structure or foundation, written on paper, the more of a firm disclosure of intent from the league of what the future may look like, but has been awfully quiet. I don't even know if there's been an acknowledgement about the labor talks from the league side whatsoever. Curious of what the announcement last week does to the temperature of that meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it feels as though USL and again, it's all important to remember that this is a corporate entity that does not own the clubs that it is tasked with negotiating on behalf of, right? So you've got USL is a separate corporate entity that is not directly controlled by the teams, and most of the revenue for USL comes through expansion fees, right? They're not driving a bunch of broadcast revenue right now. What broadcast revenue they do drive does not trickle down to there's no sharing agreement or revenue sharing agreement with the clubs. The clubs are independent businesses that operate on their own, which again is a major sticking point here because the clubs are going to say, we're a small business. Our margins are extremely thin. The option here is either maybe you don't get the healthcare you want or we don't exist, right? That's kind of the game that's being played here. That's the game of chicken is, and USL, I imagine, is having to juggle all those things. Now, could there be a better agreement or some way for the clubs to be more invested in USL at the top? That's a different question, maybe for a different day in terms of structures and all this, how this all works. But they're saying we want universal health care, or we not universal health care. We want a standard of health care that applies to all the clubs. And you can't have a club that can operate in your league if they don't provide the player health care that at least merits professional standards. And the USL is going to say, well, again, your options here are you accept that there's no health care and you get to play soccer, or there's no team and there are fewer jobs. And that's I imagine a difficult place to be for the USLPA.
Yeah, that's a very harsh reality. And folks talking about, signing a contract with a league or a team in a league that doesn't necessarily have everything spelled out for healthcare. And one of the points that the PA has talked about as far as housing in the the bylines or the small print of their contracts, they say housing or insurance pending the outline of the CBA. So if the negotiations went forth and they agreed to a certain baseline standard healthcare, the teams in those contracts would honor that. So those things still just like hanging in the balance if they agree to that. But yeah, huge red flags if creating a minimum standard takes away all profit margin or the business model. That's
right. You don't really have a business.
That's a shaky ground to stand on for all parties.
You don't really have a business. And again, I understand there's a tension there, right? Because Tyler is saying in the chat that why would you sign a contract with a league that maybe isn't stable, that you're not sure about the long-term health of the clubs, and there's no health care? Why would you sign with that league? Well, I mean, again, I guess that's true on some level. Not every player is just going to have the opportunity to go find a better league. Right? If you could play in MLS, you'd be playing in MLS. Most of these players, right? If you could go play abroad, but that's a choice too, right? Like, we just kind of accept it as normal that soccer players are supposed to go chase a dream abroad. And maybe a lot of them do want to. But what about the guys who just want to play in their hometown, or the guys who want to play in America, or whatever it is? What about those guys? Should they not be given the opportunity to do so? Or if they are given the opportunity, should they have to accept a bad deal? Should they have to accept a substandard existence as a soccer player? And again, is USL really truly a league we should believe in and support and continue to go out and buy tickets to, if a lot of their clubs are not in a position to say, hey, we'll take care of your health care like we would any other normal employee? And again, as you said, this is a situation where the players are saying, you give health care to everybody in the front office, because they're full-time employees, and that's standard operating procedure for employees in a company. But you're not going to provide that to your players. you treat us, the most important part of your business, because without us, you don't have games to sell, as throwaway items in this whole thing.
Unfortunately, this kind of hammers down to the core of sporting endeavor and sporting merit in general. Can teams, clubs, and the league accept that until you have some oversized TV deal, every team is going to lose money, right? Shouldn't the business model in itself is,
Again,
I mean, you're in the red
but this is the
until
thing,
you
of
get
course,
the big payday.
right? We are reliving the MLS experience, right? We are reliving what happened in the beginning when the MLS Players Association went into conversations with MLS about negotiating CBAs, which is they were told, "Hey, you need to suck it up because we're barely surviving here. This league could go under tomorrow, and if you don't give us a bunch of if you don't give in to a lot of these situations, and you just don't accept your bad lot for a while, there won't be a league." Now, of course, for the players who are playing now and have maybe 5, 7, 8, 10 years left in their career, what you're sacrificing for a future player that is not you, right? That's the thing. Like this becomes a tension, right? By the way, in player unions sometimes when it comes to like rookie contracts and things like that, because the veteran tour, the leadership of the players association or the union are going to say, we don't want the rookies to eat up all the money. Like we deserve the money. Why are we pushing for higher wages for rookies? So I mean, again, it's very complicated in that way because of the stakeholders often, even within the union or certainly within the league. Again, USL is a corporate entity representing the clubs who they don't directly control, and the clubs don't have a direct interest in the league corporation. What are the motivations here?
Yeah, interesting point. And you kind of channeled some Andor there, both here in this labor negotiation and a lot of us in life in many cities across the United States, fighting for a future and a morning we may not be there to see. But we shall see how that pans out. Wednesday, the next negotiation between the players and the USL. All right, we're about halfway through our show. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for joining into this conversation. A collaborative program. We are, me, Jason, and you, the viewer. If you'd like to become a member of the channel and get your comments on screen, consider, I think it's $4.99 a month now to become a channel member. Do so now. Follow us along on social media. Support us across the platforms or write us a note. Big question, maybe a tip or even a business inquiry. morningkickaround@gmail.com. All right, we got 2 segments to go. Let's get into today's hot topic here on Morning Kick Around. Today's hot topic, we go north to the frozen Northwest in Canada. An untenable situation is continuing in Vancouver, per local reporting in the province.com. In the 14 months since the search for a new owner of the Vancouver Whitecaps, Schuster, which is the group helping, about 100 parties have expressed interest. More than 30 have gone far enough to sign non-disclosure agreements to look at the Caps books, but all have come away with the same conclusion. There's no business case for investing in the team if they're still playing at BC Place. So trouble for the Western Conference champions of Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I mean, they had an incredible season last year. Went to the MLS Cup final, went to Concacaf Champions Cup final, and find themselves now in a situation where their future in Vancouver is very much in doubt. And if you remember the timeline here, this has sort of been bubbling for a while.
Since we started the show.
Don Garber parachuted in to Vancouver last season, I think in the playoff period, to kind of try to drum up some support for the club in the local business community. And maybe this is the wrong word, but kind of threaten Vancouver. Like, hey, if you don't get your act together, you're not going to have a team anymore because this is not tenable. Now, the story here this past week, is that the club sent out an email to season ticket holders which indicated the problems with the stadium. And I'm reading over at one of the Vancouver soccer blogs, the thirdsub.ca, that the media then got notification that Axel Schuster was going to speak to the media via Zoom at some point. I think it was Zoom. And this was odd. Like, the timing of this was odd. They're usually pretty good about making people available in Vancouver, but this was still like, what's going on here? So Axel Schuster on Friday spoke about this. Now, I don't want to play, it's 26 minutes. We're not playing 26 minutes of Axel Schuster, but I do want to play a bit of Axel Schuster so you get a tone here and maybe understand a little bit of what's going on with the vibes around this club right now.
Like, before we really go into the season, it's now time to update and inform our season ticket holders that we go through some challenges. And why we are speaking about it now is because we had, I would say, very friendly and good conversations with PAFCO and BC Place. And we have the feeling that's really the best they can offer to us. So it's from our side, it feels like there's nothing left. There's the progress has come to an end, and I really want to point out, and I think in the season ticket member letter, we also have said that PAFCO and BC Place really tried and to put the best effort in.
I'm going to pause it here for a second, because what he's talking about is the lease agreement, right? The new lease agreement, the revenue sharing that is available. So PAFCO runs BC Place, that is not owned by, obviously, by the Whitecaps. They wouldn't be in this position. And Rob, what are the details here? They only get something like 20% of the money that comes from concessions and match day revenue. Like, that is a problem for any soccer club. It's a problem for the Vancouver Whitecaps. It's a problem in MLS because of the way that the money has changed recently and how MLS clubs need to operate. If there's any chance of Vancouver keeping up, it's kind of out the window if they're not making more money, because MLS teams don't get enough from broadcast revenue, while MLS has done better with their broadcast revenue. We've talked about the Apple TV deal recently. You know, they're not making enough to spread it around so that it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And so there is this issue of the numbers just don't work, right?
Yeah, the numbers just aren't working. And I think the progress is ending bit from Axel is kind of worrying if you're a Whitecaps fan. And then Dan Courtemanche, and correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, the MLS Vice President Communications sent an unprompted quote in the mix here in this article: operational constraints around scheduling, because there's also this year there's multiple months of World Cup prep not allowing Vancouver to play there. I think there's going to be like a 3-month road trip for the Whitecaps this season. So in 26, there's untenable conditions for a major league club with no clear path forward to resolving these challenges in future years. This is not fair to the club or its fans. Major League Soccer continues to actively support the club, working alongside ownership to pursue a solution in Vancouver. However, meaningful progress is urgently required to establish a path forward. So that's both the club and the league saying untenable, bad word if you're a fan.
The timeline here is the problem, right? Because we've heard that the mayor of Vancouver wants to find a solution to build a stadium, or at least something, for the Whitecaps, right? It was going to be out wherever the temporary stadium that they started their MLS existence in was at one point. I can't remember what that was called, but there's this idea, but we're still years away from there being a stadium, or we're still a ways away from there being a stadium that is appropriate for the Vancouver Whitecaps to play Major League Soccer in. And here we are. The season is starting. And so here there is like, this is not like one alarm or two alarms. This is as many alarms as you can possibly have going off at this point. So, and I don't know what I mean, they're going to send the Whitecaps everywhere to play, right? They may have to play. But you have scheduling issues. Like, you can't just go down to Seattle and play all your games in Seattle, which, by the way, obviously gives up Vancouver home games. Right? They're not going to just be able to like call up Lumen Field. Hey, you guys got some extra space? Or whatever. Like, maybe they play in Calgary. I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know. I think there are some very small venues that could house the Whitecaps. There's a venue there that a Concacaf Champions Cup game happened last season. I think Calgary or one of those CPL teams, their stadium wasn't good enough by Concacaf standards. They had to play in Vancouver. So maybe that's where they end up playing. But again, all of this makes them look bad. It's bad for MLS. It's bad for the money. It's bad for the future. Are we watching the end, the slow death of the Vancouver Whitecaps? And I've seen this quote. This is this comment. Pretty sure the Whitecaps could make $400 million US if they sold their franchise. Obviously, if they sold the team to somebody who moved the team, they can make their money. But the issue is obviously they don't want to move the club. MLS probably doesn't want to unless they absolutely have to. They're not rushing to that. I don't think, obviously, the people who work for the Whitecaps don't want the club to move, right? So there is a scenario in which the franchise rights are sold and the club moves somewhere like Vegas or Phoenix, but nobody should want that. Unless you're in Vegas or Phoenix, nobody should want that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The longer that this situation with Vancouver's situation being called untenable, those other cities with Major League Soccer aspirations, I'm sure they're circling like sharks. I think we've already seen speculation in the last couple months of Vegas and Arizona, and maybe even another city, putting in some heavy bids to try to maybe swoop up that Vancouver franchise. But definitely the future looking a little tricky, more than a little tricky in Vancouver. We had one of our MK Ultras kind of have a different look at this. George with a question takes us in a little bit of a different direction, but could this be the catalyst for Canadian teams moving to the CPL, who've actually rebranded and look a lot better, by the way?
Yeah, we haven't done a review of their new branding. Chris Sow is saying Vancouver FC already exists in the Canadian Premier League. There is a Vancouver team in the Canadian Premier League, so obviously this would, how does that work?
That would change
but
the
no,
dynamics.
I don't think so, because okay, I know there's like this idea that, hey, they've got a first division Canadian league now. Why do Canadian teams play in MLS? And I'm sympathetic to the idea that in soccer we don't do this cross-border thing. This is weird. I get it. But Toronto's never going to willingly go CPL. They're just not. They don't. That's not a club that thinks of themselves as playing, unless the CPL is on the MLS level in terms of attractiveness to players, size of audience, size of global audience, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think Toronto is going to want to leave. And producer Jenny points something out in the private chat that is very important here too. This is a single entity situation, right? The owners of Vancouver and the owners of Toronto, the owners of Montreal have franchise operation rights. They don't own those clubs as distinct businesses. So decoupling that, right? So they would have to pay MLS basically to decouple their clubs from the single entity and then obviously move from that point. So there's some there's some things happening that are some legal things, some hurdles, some hoops to jump through that I mean, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but I imagine it would make it much more difficult.
Yeah, so sadly, what would most likely happen would Vancouver would more likely disappear. I hate to say these words out loud, but Vancouver Whitecaps are more likely to disappear than to move to the CPL, I imagine, or more likely move to a different city. Is there another city that could even adopt the Whitecaps name?
Let's hold on. Let's allow for all possibilities. This is a very weird North American soccer situation. Yeah. If the Vancouver Whitecaps fold, like if MLS folded them, which I don't think is likely, I think at the end they would probably sell the franchise rights and move the club like they tried to do with Columbus, or what they did with Houston, which was San Jose. They might do something like that. But even if the Vancouver Whitecaps cease to exist as an MLS team, and I do think that you have some complications because of IP and things like that, there would be some team that would pop up and be the Vancouver Whitecaps. Whether it is the continuity makes sense, or whether it's the same club would be in the eye of the beholder, sort of like are the Seattle Sounders of the NASL and of the early 90s or whatever there was the same as the Seattle Sounders today. Like that's up to you to decide.
Yeah, it truly is. And we shall see how this all plays out. But tough news coming out of Vancouver as the 14-month search for new ownership and a new home continues in British Columbia. Stick right with us here on Morning Kicker. We got another segment to go. We're going to guess to our big question here on Morning Kicker. Welcome in here, Morning Kick-Around's big question of the day. The Concacaf Champions Cup starts this week, and with this being the biggest competition in the region, are we excited about the first round of the Concacaf Champions Cup?
Yeah, sure. Real soccer in our part of the world, absolutely. How can we not be excited? And speaking of Canadian Premier League, rather. By the way, everybody's going Premier. Should MLS change their name to the Major Premier Soccer? I don't know. Never mind. That was terrible. I was workshopping something there. Doesn't work. Forge FC and Tigres coming up tomorrow. CD Olympia. That would be of I believe they are a Honduran team. Check that for me.
Olympia, you're saying?
Yeah, Olympia's Honduras.
Got it.
Club America is their competition, and then San Diego opens up against Pumas. So there's your first MLS team in action. San Diego FC, following their inaugural season of Major League Soccer, enters the CONCACAF Champions Cup against Mexican, very, very good Mexican opposition. And then coming up on Wednesday, Rob, I would like you to give us those matchups, please. I'd like you to read the matchups coming up.
So we're going to Guatemala, Club Halahu versus Monterrey, and then Vancouver versus Cruz Azul. So I guess this is the pronunciation rater for the Guatemalan team, Club Zalaju.
Oh, it was Halahu, and now it's Zalaju.
Halahu. Hondurans get in the chat.
Look, I'm not going to pretend to have. That's Guatemala, by the way.
Guatemalans getting the
Guatemala.
chat.
Yeah, Guatemala, and obviously you have a lot of that native language, the original Mesoamerican languages are mixed in there. Like when Mexican clubs have some of that, I'm like, wow, my brain explodes, and I'm like, I don't know how to say any of those things. So I'm not. I set you up, but I wouldn't have done any better. I would say Jelahu, Club Jelahu. I would say that's how I would say that, Jelahu. But I don't know. They're taking on Monterrey, who's obviously a monster of this competition. And then Vancouver FC, aforementioned Canadian Premier League team. Vancouver FC, not the Whitecaps. Vancouver FC is taking on Cruz Azul on Wednesday. Rob, what's your excitement level for the Champions Cup?
I think I'm on the same page with you for real soccer coming back onto the fields of our hemisphere. Shout out to the UPSL final. I saw some MK Ultras looking at that over the weekend. So there was some American soccer going on. But as far as CONCACAF Champions Cup, I think that it's great to see. It definitely is kind of a marker. It's like baseball fans when the pitchers and catchers start reporting. You know that the real stuff is on its way. Definitely a time for the CPL to shine. I think just other than that snow icicle kick we talked about and made international highlights, I think that these games, these CONCACAF Champions Cup, is the real look at these Canadian Premier League teams. These are about the only games I've watched front to back from that league. Having them get onto the stage of Mexican giants with Tigres and Pumas and whatnot I think it's huge. I mean, definitely not to the status of the European counterparts of the Continental Championships, but it's something. And in the pre-show meeting, you're also teasing with the idea of maybe with the calendar change, it takes on this competition takes on a new meaning. This would be halfway through the Major League Soccer season when they go to the fall to spring calendar. So this will be Major League Soccer teams fit and firing, ready to go. So maybe it changes the perspective, but now it's like, waking up from a stupor, like, we're playing soccer games here.
Yeah, it never feels right that the first competitive soccer for MLS teams is the biggest. And obviously there are other teams here that are in the same boat, but MLS teams is the Champions Cup of North America, right? The biggest competition, nominally speaking, again, in North America. I'm not saying it's massive. It's certainly not, as somebody's pointing out, it's not Copa Libertadores. It's not the Champions League, clearly, right? They even rebranded it because they were like, we're looking like crap calling ourselves the CONCACAF Champions League. We're not measuring up to that other Champions League. Maybe we should change our name. Let's change it to CONCACAF Champions Cup. I actually don't know why they did that. But maybe that's part of it.
Maybe to differentiate from Leagues Cup, or they removed the league phase from it, and it's strictly a playoff type table now.
Maybe that's why they went with that, because now we're just doing a knockout competition basically instead of something that approximates a Champions League. Although they went to we're not doing the league phase like Champions League of Europe, which is still a thing everybody's getting adjusted to. It never feels right that this is the first soccer of the year. That's definitely a thing I think about. But as you said, when the calendar switches, I don't know what that means exactly for MLS because I've been one of those people who said one of the problems for Major League Soccer in this competition is they constantly run into it while they're preparing for their season. They've had very little time. They haven't played a meaningful game yet, blah, blah, blah. And yet, and I don't think one example necessarily indicts all of MLS and all of MLS history. But you look what Bodo Glimt is doing in the Champions League right now.
Awesome.
No, they weren't great. They won their last 2 games to push themselves into a knockout playoff where they're probably going to get routed or at least beaten. But they did, they've beaten Manchester City. They beat Atletico Madrid, and they haven't played a league game yet this season because up there in Norway, they follow the same kind of calendar that Major League Soccer uses right now. So, I think it's going to be a big difference for MLS. It's mainly about, again, quality across the roster rather than necessarily the timing of the season because MLS for too long has valued the top end of the roster and not put enough money into the middle and the bottom. Maybe that's changing enough to catch up to the big Mexican clubs. I don't know. But obviously we saw it last year, right? That Vancouver was this great story and they go all the way to the final and they just gets absolutely wrecked by Cruz Azul in the final, 5-0, which wasn't fun. I want this tournament to mean more. And it can't mean more until other leagues win it. It can't mean more until somebody besides Mexico wins it. Now, I know Seattle's done it. Okay. But that only happens if everybody's sort of on equal footing. And I imagine that this might be part of the calculation for MLS when it comes to switching the calendar. Yes, it's about transfer markets and selling players and that kind of thing. But it's also about, hey, we really want to win this competition. We want to be able to say we're the best league in North America, at the very least, as we challenge for the idea that we might be one of the best leagues in the world. So how about we go win this thing? Maybe our calendar switch helps us.
And putting it in the spotlight, Jorge Mas, leader of Inter Miami, put this competition in the crosshairs for the next target for Leo Messi and company. He said, let's move to the continental competitions now that they've won all the other ones in domestically available. And then are we underselling San Diego's accomplishments, what they did last year, and then getting into this competition their first year?
We are a bit. I would also like to point out, since you brought Jorge Mas into Miami up, and obviously, involved in this competition, not playing in the first round because of their bye, but Felipe Cardenas addressed the idea just last week or a week and a half ago, and maybe a story we didn't talk enough about, of Inter Miami playing in the Copa Libertadores, that this is something that Jorge Mas has said is a dream. When asked how serious he was about pushing MLS into the Copa Libertadores, he said, dreams come true. I have had conversations with CONMEBOL and with President Alejandro Dominguez about looking into participation in the Copa Libertadores. There are precedents because Mexican clubs have played in the Libertadores before. Now, Felipe goes on to say this is nonsense right now. It's too much. Stop it. Let's pull back on the reins. But there is this thing that's out there, right, about if MLS is going to be truly ambitious, and I think Jorge Mas and some other owners are trying to push the league to be truly ambitious, and maybe the calendar switch is indicative of that, then there is going to be a quest to play at the highest level possible, to challenge yourself. Jorge Mas is so ambitious and so willing, and obviously he has an incredible asset in Lionel Messi who can attract players who might be playing for less than they could get other places. But he wants to go win everything he can. And if you're kind of blocked off from playing for what is truly the most prestigious competition in the hemisphere, and you're pushing, what I'm saying is MLS may not be satisfied with the Champions Cup at some point in the near future. But for now, how about just go win that thing and then figure it out after that?
Take it step by step, day by day, as they say. But yeah, Inter Miami putting this competition, the Concacaf Champions Cup, in their crosshairs. It all kicks off tomorrow. 3 games on the Tuesday night docket: Forge versus Tigres, Olympia versus America, and San Diego versus Universal Nacional, aka Pumas. And just note,
hold on, what was that?
Huh?
Pumas is what? Pumas is what?
Is that Universal Nacional?
Okay, Universidad, because it's representing the university there. University. You said Okay. Anyway, I don't know. I'm sorry. I got tripped up by that, Rob.
You're picking up some strays, or at least maybe I am. On should we have a pronunciation corner here, a bonus episode where we have all the
Maybe.
pronunciations picked apart here throughout the day? But that's about it for Monday's show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you for Mr. Bob for the contributions. Later on this week, we are going to have a guest dip into maybe a little bit. Some expertise on the Concacaf Champions Cup. So we'll have a reporter join us later this week to talk about this competition in a little bit more detail. And then we might have some Cosmos action later in the week as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm anxious to talk to John Arnold because he can give us some insight as to Major League Soccer's place in North America, and then obviously the idea of maybe playing one day in Copa Lib or doing something with CONMEBOL that connects all of this, because I am fascinated by this thing that Major League Soccer and Liga MX, both of these leagues, are locked out of playing a higher level of international competition. Like Mexico used to play in Copa Lib. They pulled out of Copa Lib, and now they've tried to get back in, and FIFA's like, no, you can't do that. So if you are an ambitious league, or you're a league that wants to grow beyond where you are, and this is a world of competition, and I'm not saying it always is necessary, but this is the path that these leagues have carved out. Like, they want to be bigger. They're watching UEFA make money hand over fist. They're watching, this battle. The Club World Cup comes to American shores and makes a ton of money for FIFA. FIFA's pushing their role in club football. And these leagues are thinking, okay, how do we grow? It's a worldwide market now. You're not locked in geographically. People can see your product around the world. That's what the Apple TV deal was about for MLS, right? So if you're saying we want to grow and get the respect of world football fans and drive a bigger audience, how do we do that? Well, in a very real sense, it's player higher level games, right? Participating in the Club World Cup is one thing. It's great. But if you are in North America and that's only every 4 years and you can't really, grow beyond your station, what you're going to be pushing for is a way to maximize what's possible in this part of the world. Because UEFA is not going to let MLS teams play in the Champions League. And they're not going to let Mexican clubs play in the Champions League. But CONMEBOL, which is very much in the same boat. Obviously, their clubs or their leagues have a little bit of a different economic position, right? We know that it's tougher business down there. There's some very big and successful Brazilian clubs, but after that, it gets a little dicey. If they're trying to build up their competitions and trying to compete in the world market as well, hey, let's tap into the big money that exists in Mexico and the United States. And then it becomes, what can you do there, right? Is it Copa Lib with Mexico and MLS involved? Is it some new competition? Obviously, travel and scheduling is a massive thing with that because it's a long way from here to Buenos Aires.
Yeah, I was going to add that too. If there is some sort of merger and the North American teams do join Copa Libertadores, hopefully it's not a large number of teams, because the realities, I saw a video describing the distances, even from like Inter Miami down to Brazil or Argentina is like a 6-8 hour flight. And then so something like if Vancouver did something like that, it would be an incredible flight. And I see you with the inquisitive eyebrows questioning that flight distance from Miami to South America, but it is significant regardless of what fact finding you've got here.
No. You were close. You weren't way off. It's not 6. 6 is like from here to Europe. Most places in Europe, I think it's more like 9, and it can be, obviously, if you're not in Miami, it's more like 10, 12, even more than that.
Yeah, so any more than 1 or 2 trips going from continent to continent, north to south, would be just untenable on a human level. And we know that there's been some tragedies with travel across South America as well, and that would only up the risk if there's more flights, longer distances, and all that. So we'll see how that all plays out. But getting back to the crux of the conversation, CONCACAF Champions Cup, which will include Miami at later stage, kicks off this week. And John Arnold will be with us, is scheduled to be with us on Wednesday to give us a little bit more nitty-gritty details of what the future may bring in MLS's role in that competition. And then if there's anything else, I'd say get involved in the show. Support us on social media at MKickaround across all the various platforms. Interaction on there is always good, and like to post on the post thread on the actual channel here on YouTube itself. You can send us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. If you've got a topic or a tip for something you'd like us to cover here or a business inquiry, write us a note.
Can I also say that I believe, and we do have 2 streaming options on YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, you can be watching horizontal. I imagine that's mostly, if you're a desktop, that's obviously the better way to watch it. There's also a vertical option on YouTube. We're streaming vertically. And if you're on your phone and you like it that way, that may be your better option. I think we're dealing with 2 different chat rooms for those streams, Robert. I think I'm seeing that in the chat. And maybe I'm picking up something that might not be completely accurate, but I've seen, like, I know our man Riverside Grove is in here constantly in the chat and dropping in knowledge, and I'm not sure if it's crossing over as much. So I just want to let people know that may be why you're not seeing as much interaction. If you're in the vertical, there might be people in the horizontal or vice versa. It's a weird world we live in, Rob.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. I'm actually getting a text message too, curious why there's not many texts going on, but they were in the vertical view, which has less viewers in there than the regular landscape view. So maybe we'll consider consolidating to make this a little bit less fractured conversation. Yeah, let us know if the vertical is giving you any benefit. We took the option to be in more places, but if that's taking away from the experience, we should definitely address that. So Wednesday we got a guest. Friday, I think we're talking Cosmos, and there's more Summer League soccer news coming out. We heard from USL 2 of some new divisions going on, and there's a new USL 2 division in Texas now, and then the schedule should be coming out in the next 5 or 6 days or so there. So Summer League and my schedule is starting to come together, trying to figure out what weekends I can make plans because I'll be doing Oakland County FC stuff. And I got to say, as I was chopping up the videos, you looked awfully good in that OCFC jersey last week.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, it's a nice shirt. It's right here. Let me grab it just so anybody who maybe didn't see it on the last show, there it is right there with the stripes. I know there was a discussion about stripes over in Oakland County, but I think it's a good looking shirt. I like the color.
Yeah, bleed purple, as they say, and can't wait to get going with summer soccer. And curious, we're still pending. So sometime during the February month, we're also supposed to hear about the college panel actually coming with their recommendations. We'll see if that comes into play. So big news pending still. And then Wednesdays got that USLPA negotiation. So big stuff coming this week still.
I would also like to take the opportunity. This came up on Friday. I went back and watched it. Shout out to Kurt Grazer and Knack Factory, who make the documentary on Portland Hearts of Pine. They included your guys' voice, that would be me, in the open to that most recent episode. It starts out with somebody that I'm not a huge fan of, but after that, it gets to me, which is really the best part of the video, if you ask me, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, who would you rather hear from, right? I mean, especially you. Who'd you rather hear from, Jason? Right?
We'll leave it there. I don't want to be too negative or mean on a Monday. We'll just leave it there. I'm sure there's some people who really like that guy. It's not me, but I'm in that video a little bit too. And then obviously they do a great job of chronicling the first year and more of Portland Hearts of Pine. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I'm great to see there's a comment in the chat saying that season 2 is happening, which was a question I put out to those guys, if they were going to keep it ongoing or if the season 1 of Up the Hearts would be isolated. It looks like it's going to continue into their second season. That's encouraging and fun. We'll watch out for that. They set the bar high for in-house content creation, or at least a close to home content creation, because I knew that's a separate
local production. Yeah, local company, local production, local partnership, incredible stuff. I mean, if you asked me to make a list of places, American soccer places that I haven't been, that I would really like to go to, I think Portland might be top 3. Might be number 1 right now. I don't know. I'd have to think about it, but it might be there. And I know, look, there are lots of things we want to do. Taking want to like an actual trip is a lift. I saw Luke was in here asking about a trip to Madison. I'm wearing a Madison Ford Madison shirt right now. He asked about a trip to Madison. I'd love to go to Madison. Paying for those things are the biggest issue. And hopefully we have some partnerships and some ways to get that done in the near future.
And one of the things we're working on this week is getting the flyer fully put together for February 18th. A big part of what we are actually going to put a want to an actual plan is the Kickathon 2026. our first attempt at a marathon show. And baked into that is a telethon to raise funds for increased production levels and potential travel funds. So February 18th, put that on your calendar. We're going to spend the whole morning with guests, games, and fundraising. So thank you for everyone tuning in today, and I look forward to everyone in the future at that kickathon. And then we will be back on Wednesday. So until then, everyone be safe, stay warm, continue to be brave, and enjoy your soccer.